Okay, so when we left off, we glued up the cab, and so it's dry now. It's all cured. This piece right here isn't glued in. That's just a spacer that I put in there to make sure everything was even when it's clamped up. You want to make sure that the top doesn't splay in. So when you glue this thing up and clamp it up, make sure you use one of your cross pieces to put in there to clamp it, but don't glue that in. It just basically helps to keep the whole thing square when it's glued up. Anyway, so to put the screws in there, basically, you want to come in just a little bit. You don't want to be interfering in any way. The legs are going to screw in like right here, so you want to kind of come in about 1/2 inch and draw yourself a little line up to where about the middle of the wood is. I just eyeball that, as long as it's going into the wood, you're going to be fine with your screws. And then what I do is I drill a little pilot hole, I trace up, and I make my mark. I just eyeball this, I don't measure it, but same thing with the other side. And then what I do is I take like a 1/4 inch bit and create like a countersink, so the screws will countersink in there and not be sticking out of the side and interfering with the legs in any way. Well, they're actually far away from legs, but you don't want them popping up from underneath your decal is the idea with that. So when you're done with that, countersinking all the holes, and you get your screws in, here's what it ends up looking like. So they're countersunk in there, and you're not going to be able to see them once you have your decal on there. Okay, now from here we can, and here's the size of screws that I use, number 4 by 1/2 inch. They're about the smallest little flat heads that you can get from Home Depot, and they go in here real nice with just a little tiny pilot hole. That's about a 1/16 inch pilot hole, maybe smaller, I don't know. And then a countersink, so you got a nice clean edge there that's gonna take the decal nicely. So you can see how it starts to look like a cab now. And you can also see I'm holding the phone, so I can only do this with one hand, but you can see like when you hold it and you play it, your fingers are going to end up right where the buttons are. The flipper buttons are going to be on the bottom. So anyway, the next step is going to be getting a spacer in here to hold the phone and make sure the spacing's right on that. Then we'll do the spacer for the head, and pretty much the framework for this will be done, and it'll go pretty quickly from here on out. Okay, so back with part 3 here. What we're going to do now is just charge directly into putting this piece into the cap that's going to support the phone. It's 4.5 inches long by 2 3/8 inches wide. I decided I'm going to cut the center of it out. You don't have to do that, but I'm going to go ahead and do that just in case I decide to power the lights off of an external battery. What I'll do at that point is then I'll just I still don't know. I'm going to try to power the LEDs off of the battery that's on board the controller, but that battery is literally the size of a thumbnail, and so it's probably even under 200 milliamp hours, let's say. A tiny LED, one running at one time, probably isn't going to suck that much juice out of it, but by cutting this out, I could potentially just Velcro a rechargeable 9-volt onto the bottom of the phone, and then just shim the phone in so I can just pop it out of there and change the battery out real quick if I need to. Again, I don't know if I'm going to do that. I'm still going to try to flush the whole thing down with being powered by the Bluetooth controller. But so the idea is we have our cab here that's already got the screws, etc., etc. I set my tripod up today, but you can kind of sort of start to see like when you're going to be playing it, you're basically going to hold it by the rails, and then your fingers and tips of your fingers will support it, and your middle fingers end up being right where the control buttons are going to be for the flippers. So You can see that a little bit better now that I've got both hands free. What we're going to do now is basically just, I'm going to go ahead and cut that out first, but I'm going to just show you real quick. This piece is going to fit in here. It's going to go up to the edge of our line right there on each side. And then I'm going to just kind of get it in there level or whatever. And you can kind of test fit the phone in on top of that. And what I'm going to do is after I have this cut out, I'm going to just basically put a clamp on it and then just kind of adjust it, micro adjust it by hand to where it's not quite level with the surface, but just maybe a little bit, like a millimeter sticking out like that. I don't know if you can see it or not. But I want it to be almost level with the surface, but I'm going to put a bezel over the top of the phone, so it needs to be just a little bit lower, like about like that. So once I have that line, again, this is all going to be happening after I trace the piece out, but then you could just easily mark the line there where it's going to be. I've only done this roughly, so when I get off camera to cut this out, I'll do it a little bit better. But once you make sure you have the phone in there level and exactly, you know, kind of where you want it, and have it all adjusted exactly the way you want it, you know, and it's in there kind of by hand, you can mark your sides, and then you can take the piece out and put glue on it and glue it back in and be confident about where the positioning is gonna be when you're done with it. But anyway, I'm gonna hop off camera here real quick and cut that piece out, and I'll go ahead and glue this one piece in. These two pieces right here are just thin little pieces that I milled out of this same hobby board stuff, 1/4 inch thick. And they're basically going to go in, when I glue this thing in, they're going to go in underneath here along the side. I don't know if you can see that, God, the lighting sucks. But you can see kind of how they're going to glue in, and they'll support this board. So that way, if you're shoving the phone in or whatever, it'll be that extra level of support. So I'm going to do that on each side, and I'll be back. Then from there, we're gonna work this front piece in that's gonna actually support the cab. But hang on just a second. Okay, so I've got the support piece for the phone. I've got the center cut out. That's not only gonna possibly give me potential room to stick a battery to the bottom of the phone with Velcro, maybe. It also saves a little tiny micro amount of weight. Now that's going to matter on something this small. This is a lot smaller even than my other one that I did. But what I did was I found out where I wanted the positioning of the phone. Went in and marked a line on each side. You can see there where I've gone in and roughed up the glue line with the X-Acto again, just so it'll have a good bond. Right, so there's the lines. All I gotta do is glue this sucker in. Now I'll be right back with that. Okay, so here is the little panel that holds the phone cut and glued in. You can see the little strips of wood that I glued in underneath on the sides there. Really easy. Next is going to be the piece that holds the head steady. So you could just basically throw the phone in there. You can see how it basically matches, keeping in mind our 1/8 inch space that we need here for this next piece that holds the head in place. Just take one of your little pieces. Remember, I cut out all the pieces at once, so I just took one of those pieces. And then I took it to the belt sander and angled it a little bit so it wouldn't brush up against the phone and accidentally turn it off, because the power switch is right here. So what I'm going to do, instead of trying to measure it all out or whatever, is just hold the phone in there. I'll slide this piece in there to basically get the determination of where we want it. And that's about where I want it, right there. It gives the phone just a little bit of leeway. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to cheat the angle thing. There's going to be a spacer piece that goes in between here and holds the head up a little bit, elevates the head. All the old Ballys and Williams machines usually had a little spacer in between here, and so we're going to glue this in sort of at just a straight angle, so because the angle here is so shallow that you can kind of get away with it and have the head hide it, because the spacer will be tall enough to have the head hide all that. And you can see how the phone fits in there pretty flush with just a minimum amount of space on the sides there that'll allow for a bezel, which I'm going to make like out of plastic. We'll get to that later. But right now, I'm going to do the headpiece. And so, since that looks pretty good where it is, just adjust it a little bit. Okay, that looks fine to me. And now, I'm just going to make a little line on the edge. Actually, we need to allow for a 1/8 space, so I'm going to make it a little bit shallower on each side. Right? And then I'm going to cut that to size right now. So I'll just use a little scrap piece of wood, or let's do it right. Let me get a little straight edge. Mark it out real quick properly. Okay, I'm gonna have to come back after I cut this. Okay, so here's the piece cut down to size. I'm gonna just take that, put it in, give it a test fit. Make sure it's level on each side, keeping it kind of sort of at a flat angle on each side. It looks pretty level, so I can pretty much glue it in from there. Just give it one more test fit from the phone. Okay, so that's looking pretty tight and nice. One more thing that I'm going to do this piece is, if you notice right here on the iPhone, power button right there on top. So you need to be able to access that. In order to do that, there needs to be a hole through this piece. So I'm going to drill a hole right around here. But in order to get that exactly, the location of that exactly right, I'm going to pull this out a little bit, take note of where the button is, kind of try to find the center of that. Then I'll mark it with a little line here going back. Okay. Up the little line going back, that leads directly to the power button. Now, what I'm going to do, draw a line across there, one across there to find the center point. Right. And take a screw, just an ordinary like wood screw. Find that center point, kind of push it in a little bit, work it around a little bit so you have a little dimple in there. That's going to keep your drill bit from jumping off path. And what you're going to do is you're going to drill straight through this sucker. So I'll be right back after I do that, and then it's time to glue it in. Okay, boom, perfect little 1/8 inch hole. There, going all the way through. So fit this back in real quick here and take a look at it. See where the phone is at. Okay. what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take a toothpick here and I'll put it through this hole and just test it, see how you can immediately hits the power button. So that way when this thing's all shimmed in there tight and everything, there'll be a hole in the back panel as well to go in right in the exact same place. And you can just take like a little toothpick or a paper clip or something and turn the phone on or off that way. Okay, so now I'm going to glue this thing in, and that's going to wrap it up for video number 3, just because I want to try to keep these videos a little shorter and quicker as possible, just to be able to get stuff done on this thing. But as you can see, pretty much that's it. That's the whole bottom part of the cab, minus just the bottom panel, front panel, and back panel. So after I have this glued in, next video is going to cover entirely building the head and cutting out the acrylic panels. A really simple little process. It's not that hard. And then we're going to drill a hole in here for the lighting that's going to go all the way through up to the head. I'll put the spacer on the head and I'll go through all that. But as you can see, pretty much within a couple of hours on a Saturday, you could have a pretty substantial amount of progress done towards making one of these. When it comes down to it, I'm going to just shim. I'm going to use the popsicle sticks and I'm going to sand those down uber thin and just shim this thing in. I'll glue those shims in on the side so pressure fits in real tightly. That way, if I want to, I can just pull the phone out. And if I do end up putting a battery under here or whatever, it's accessible right there. I'll have a little connector for it or whatever. Again, I'm going to still try to use the battery on board the Bluetooth unit to power it, but we'll see how that works. I don't know how bright it's going to be with that or whatever. But anyway, you can see that the progress goes fairly quick once you're underway.